I'm doing a little book review, which is part of what I want to start doing on my channel anyway, but I'm doing this for a final for school, so I figured I might as well, double and do both. I'm going to be talking about the Devil's Due series today. It is a book series by Veronica. Currently there are 3 out, and I think a 4th one is being released really soon. I'm up to date, so I've read all 3, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what the books are about and give you my reviews on them, and all the information will be in the description. I'm going to put all the links to Goodreads, Amazon, whatnot, my Goodreads, her Goodreads, everybody's Goodreads. So the first book is called Deals with the Devil, and I was introduced to this series because I joined an independent study at UConn, and I really enjoyed it, and we were reading it as a group and discussing it. That was the basic premise of the class. Deals with the Devil by Veronica is an urban fantasy book series, and it takes place on UConn campus, which is really interesting for me to read. So I'm just going to read you the little book blurb that you usually have on the back of the book. The Hellgate is opening and magic is coming back. We're not ready. I don't want to be a witch. Magic means trouble every time. I just want to be a regular, mundane professor. But then the freaky cat shows up, and now magic is bursting out all over campus. Roses are on a murdering rampage, the library is throwing books at me, and the students are having orgies under the willow tree. Well, that might not be due to the magic. I need to close the Hellgate that's spewing wild magic all over the university before it triggers the magical apocalypse. And I need to do it fast because Satan might be coming to campus, which wouldn't be great. But I'm a little distracted, a lot distracted, by the new English professor, the one who watches me like he knows something about me, something I don't know. See what I mean? Magic means trouble. So this is the first book of the series. It follows the main character, who her name is Luna Farlow. I think. Luna, for sure. And she's starting her job at UConn as a new junior professor, and she's back in her hometown at Storrs here in Connecticut, and she's met with magic spreading throughout the campus. So the book follows her having to work with her friends and family, trying to figure out what's happening on campus with this wild magic running around, and you're introduced to the fact that she doesn't really remember who she is. She has this amnesia, and she's trying to figure out what the magic is doing here, who she is, who these people are that are being introduced, which we have a lot of interesting characters being introduced, like her friends Pam, Nikki. We have Marlo introduced, who is the love interest, which I think is a very interesting relationship that develops throughout the 3 series. And Nathan, of course. So personally, I rated the first book 3 out of 5 stars. Deals with the Devil was a very engaging book. However, it had its moments where it made me feel like I wanted to put the book down. Personally, being a UConn student, I really liked reading this because I felt like I could immerse myself in the magic, because I was able to really identify with where everything was revolving the setting. The beginning of the book was a little slow to me. I personally didn't think we needed the day-by-day process which was shown, because the first few chapters were just kind of following Luna throughout her days. She would go from her house to school, have something happen, then go from school back to her house, and then the process would repeat for the few first chapters, which it got a little tiring. However, I really also did like it, because it felt like with this amnesia that Luna has, it's like we're going through this story with her day by day, trying to figure it out. So I think it worked well. It could have just maybe been sped up a little bit and just had a few things cut out of it. I personally really like how all the characters interact with each other. I think their dynamic and their relationships are really good. I really was into Marlo and Luna's relationship. It was huge enemy to lovers vibes, which is one of my favorite tropes. I do think the jump into the relationship is a little bit fast, but that kind of gets explained later on. I just wish there was a chapter or few dedicated more to having a conversation, getting to know each other, because in the reader's point of view, it's a little quick, but that also could just be how I feel about it. So overall, I'll give the first book 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was really good, and it's a really good introduction to the series. It has a lot of nice world building and introduction to all the characters and everything you need to know. So on to the second book of the series, which is Devils in the Details. This one was my favorite of the series so far. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Just the little book blurb again on the back. Being a witch with amnesia, trying to prevent the magical apocalypse isn't as bad as you think. That's a lie. It's bad, real bad, but I've got my coven to get me through. I've also got the 58th president of hell living in a house, a handful of tricksters to help me loosen up, and a new garden gnome with an irritatingly cheery disposition. And I've got Marlo, the fallen angel I've been chasing all year. What could go wrong? I think the sequel really improved with the story. The engagement from before, from the first book, was really continued, and I was more immersed in this one than I was the first one. Luna's character development is significant, and I enjoyed being on the journey with her to discover more about who she was and the memories that she's forgotten. We learn more about the characters and their involvement with Luna's history, and overall, I think the story in the second book progressed a lot more smoothly than it did in the first book. The end sets itself up very beautifully for the third book in the series. I really started to like Luna and Marlowe's relationship even more, and I really started to like Marlowe. His character has played a huge role in Luna's memory, and I really like how Veronica Ford has him playing a leading hand in helping her discover her memories that she doesn't really remember. The first book showed Marlowe really kind of avoiding Luna, and having it develop into this really deep relationship Veronica Ford is showing us is really rewarding. Luna, as I mentioned, learns a lot about who she was and is regaining a lot of those memories that she forgot, and I kind of really fell in love with this really conflicting character development she has. And I'm trying not to spoil too much. As a reader, I was really left questioning if Luna's really still the same character we were introduced to in the first book, which is an interesting character point to have to interact with your protagonist as a reader. Without severely spoiling, looking back at foreshadow moments that led to Luna's like really big reveal that we have in the second book was really set up well. It was just noticeable enough to make you remember it, but if you were to go back and reread it, you would notice a lot more on top of it, which I personally enjoy in a book. And this is definitely my favorite in the series so far. Third book so far, which I think is the last one out as of right now, and the fourth one I think is coming out early this summer, is Speak of the Devil. So the book blurb on the back of the book this time was that I don't want to be evil, but I do like murder and mayhem. When my old friend Leviathan kidnaps my angel and starts killing demons, I've got to figure out how to embrace my dark side to bring him to justice. Or kill him, whichever is easier. But first I've got to get rid of him, and the Hells are not cooperating. I also need to convince Marlowe to trust me again, even though he probably shouldn't. Then I gotta get back to my coven, find my mom, and destroy the world. So from the book blurb, there's a bit of a spoiler. I also gave this one a 4, but looking back, maybe I should have given it like a 3.5 out of 5. I didn't love it as much as the second one, but I think the story progressed really well. I think the story progressed better than the first one, but the first one had to, create this huge world that we were introduced to. So I was given the chance to read this book as an arc, and I will say that while the first 2 books are set here on campus at UConn, this setting is almost entirely in hell. Book 3 creates a different atmosphere than the previous 2 books, and it was a nice change of pace. However, I felt like the beginning of the book was way too slow. The first half of the book was really slow because we were introduced to such a drastically different setting than what we've been introduced to already on campus. It kind of felt like reading book 1 of a series all over again, and we didn't really get back into the flow of the main plot until chapter 49, which sounds like really far into the book, but there's a lot of small chapters, so they kind of move on fast. I will say though that the second half of the book really made up for the slow beginning. We're introduced to a lot of new characters in the third book, which is really nice. I just had wished that we had seen a little bit more of the characters from book 1 or 2, because it again felt like a kind of like a new series, but there is a 4th book and maybe a 5th book, so we just kind of have to follow what Veronica Ford does here. In this current last book, a lot of plot points are given solutions to, and of course there's new problems introduced, but a lot of points are explained, which I really enjoyed. Marlowe and Luna's relationship skyrocketed. It's such an interesting relationship. It's definitely quite spicy compared to the book 1 and book 2, so if you're not into that, there's a warning. We finally get that intimacy between Marlowe and Luna, physically and emotionally, which I really enjoyed. Veronica focuses on showing Marlowe's vulnerability, which without too many spoilers I can't really explain. But it's really nice to see a male protagonist being so open, and also having his insecurities and his flaws, because I don't really feel like we see that, especially into the enemies to lovers trope nowadays, because it's just feminine hero who is there to defeat the villain, and we have the really hot, cool male love interest who's there to be the really hot guy, and they have their character traits and stuff, but they're really just kind of there to be there for the reader to thirst over, I guess. But it didn't really feel like that. He felt like a really well developed character, and I really liked that he had these insecurities that you see in the third book. Overall, I really enjoyed this one more than book 1, but book 2 is definitely my favorite, and I can't wait to see where book 4 takes me. As a series, I would have struggled to get into it if I hadn't had to stick with the series, but also this was my first time reading kind of urban fantasy. I'm really into fantasy and romantasy now when it comes to reading books. Like my favorite series is Shatter Me series. I think it's definitely a series worth giving a shot, and I really can't wait to see where book 4 takes us. I will link all of her stuff down below. Please, please, please check her out. I'm pretty sure she's like self-published. She's doing this all on her own, and she has her friends like helping her edit the books and everything. So she's very like small author, and she's doing an amazing job, all considering. And you know, I'm definitely gonna stick with her because this would be really cool to be like, oh, you know her? Like, yeah, I read her first books. I read her book as an arc kind of thing. I'm just very excited to see where Veronica Ford keeps taking the series and where her series and books, new books, because she's doing another series right now too. I just excited to see where all of that goes, and I hope it goes far for her because it definitely seems like she deserves it. Thank you for watching, and hopefully there'll be more videos eventually. And for my Wix class, hello, and I hope you guys enjoy this too. So thank you.